Welcome to the Spawn Chunks. This is episode number 386, recorded on Monday, January 26, 2026. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Johnny on this podcast that is all about Minecraft. You can get it on all of your favorite podcasting networks, including video versions on Spotify and on YouTube. Good morning, sir.
Hello, yeah, we've been talking a lot about He-Man in the pre-show. If that's something that interests you, we've been chatting it up on the Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast. The He-Man trailer just came out. We've been talking about the production design of it, the casting choices, and a little bit about voice acting as well. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, check out the extended version of the podcast if you support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/thespawnchunks. You get access to listen to the show live. You get to chat to us and other like-minded Minecraft fans in Discord. And we have a quarterly and monthly hangout coming up really soon. Monthly hangouts usually happen on the last Saturday of every month, so we have one of those coming up on the 31st, where you can share what you've been up to in Minecraft this month. That's all over at patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
Coming up this week on the show, we have listener email covering all kinds of different things, as well as a new snapshot about baby horses and other mounts in Minecraft.
Yes. Before we get into all of the horseplay, though, let's check in with what we've been doing in our Minecraft lives. And it's over to you, Joel. What's new on the Citadel?
So I did a little bit more digging on the Citadel and focusing on the chamber that houses the power core for the command center on the Mushroom Island. And then I spent the rest of the week working on the doors, and those doors are on the second floor for the large structural wings that I've got going on. And I've made some changes. One of the nice things about having a symmetrical build that's got 4 different symmetrical wings on it is that I can iterate a couple of different times and decide what I like. And so when building these facades, not knowing what was going to be behind them, I thought, hey, I'm just going to build a temporary door. I'm just going to put a big wall there and make it look like a big blast door that's come down, and then redesign the door a couple of times. So I did that, kind of chose the one that I liked. I think we're going to go with the one that has the observers in it, and then I've got some redstone behind them, so the lights actually blink, so it looks like there's like an active mechanism keeping the doors shut. I did it with copper bulbs as well, but they're just so big and so bright that they feel very distracting. It doesn't feel like it's part of the door, whereas the observers, of course, the little red light on them just kind of blinks flush with the door texture. So I think we're going to go with that. And I decided to change the exterior material that I was bringing in, which was polished tuff, and I'm going to switch that out for quartz blocks and polished deep slate, and it's a much higher contrast. So you've got the white of the quartz and the dark gray of the deep slate, both of which have that paneling on them. So like each block, it does not connect to texture. Each block has got a border, and there's stairs and slabs and stuff in both. So I get lots of shape available to me. And so I'm going with a white quartz wall with a black kind of trim, keeping with the hexagonal themes. They're not like perfect, octagonal. They're not perfect octagons, but they've got kind of like chamfered corners. So it's like a square with like angled corners on the frame.
Yeah.
And I haven't decided what's happening above them. So like the top parts are still very flat. There's not a lot going on. I would imagine as the ceiling starts to come towards the middle, there's going to be more supports and more depth happening, but I haven't gotten that far. And so right now, having just finished the fourth or the third design and decided, okay, that's the one I want to go with, I still have to go back and change the other two. The other 2 or 3 still have tuff in front of them. And then the one that I have right now that's got the quartz in front of it, I believe is my storage room. And that was a lot of work because, of course, I had to raise the floor and I had to move a lot of storage out of the way because the storage was like right up to the edge of the wing. And the depth of these doors is like 9 or 10 blocks. So I had to move half my storage to the other side of the room. And so everything's in barrels, and there's chests that are full of shulker boxes that are just like quickly moved on stream and not really in any kind of order. So what I want to do is take the design of the villager trading area that I did, copy that over, but with the idea of using it as storage for now. So at least my storage room is going to look really cool because you spend so much time in it when you're building these big projects. And that was a mistake that I did in Westhill, is that I really didn't do much with the storage room until the very, very, very end, because I was just like in this basement. It was the great central storage area for me practically, but because I was there so much, it just never, it looked kind of dumb. So this time around, I thought, I'm a couple months into this project. Let's make the storage room look nice, and then I can stay here for as long as I want till I decide maybe I want to go somewhere else. But I'm thinking, like, as I thought about putting storage in the top parts of this, I don't know how practical that's going to be, because if I need anything, I'm always going to have to go way to the top of this building to get it, rather than something that's about mid-level. So we'll have to see what's practical and what's something I want to change, because unfortunately with the storage room, you're kind of going to see everything. So I don't know if I want shulker boxes kind of like all out, because it's kind of gonna look more like a Minecraft video game as opposed to a sci-fi base. So like I have to figure out what's gonna work for me. But right now it's coming along. I'm liking the progress, but it's slow just because I have to iterate, live and survival on stream. And but it's fun to explore that kind of stuff, because I feel like you can learn a lot by repeating the task. You kind of have some happy accidents or some ideas come to you, and it's nice to not have to tear something down and rebuild it. You can just build it 3 times in a row and then change it every time and decide which one you like.
Yeah. Are you still using the mod that shows you the contents of a shulker box, like on the lid, where it kind of shows an item on there?
Yes.
Or do you like label them yourself, kind of thing?
No, I'm using a new one. I can't remember the name of it right now. I think it's just called Shulker Labels. The other one went away, or wasn't updated, and this one is actually better because it has the ability to change the size of the icons.
Right.
And
yeah.
it has the ability to the icons don't stick out. So even if you use a flat texture of a block, previously it would look like a button. It would be very, very far out on the shulker box. These are all flat, and you have the ability to change it from just the texture of the item to how the item would appear in your inventory. So something like a stone block previously would be just the one square face of the stone block. But now when you label a shulker box as stone, you have the option to use it as an icon. And in your inventory, blocks are cubes, like they have
you
3
can see
faces
like a corner.
that you can see. Yeah. So that's what's on the box, which is a lot easier to see and pick up. So yeah, I mean, I've been using that. I do label them, like I do write, I name them as well on an anvil, but I definitely labeled them. And the shulker boxes are also color coded as well. So like stones in a gray box, quartzes in a white box, that kind of stuff.
That's kind of where I was going with it, really, because you could still, if they're labeled, understand what the contents of each box is if you wanted them to fit like the color scheme of the command center.
Yeah.
If you wanted them all to be like white and orange and blue panels attached to a wall, and then have it open almost like a wall safe where it kind of swings out from the wall instead of being like boxes on the floor. But it really depends on your tolerance for like, now I have to make my redstone box white, and that's gonna like screw some stuff up in your sort of organizational system. So I think there's a couple of possibilities there to make the storage system look a little bit more sci-fi, but I agree it's a tall order in a game like Minecraft.
I might be able to do that in some of the farms. Like if I decide to make like a super smelter, or if I make a bamboo farm, it might be cool to like not just have the shulker boxes labeled with bamboo, but perhaps maybe label them with something that either the shaders pick up or looks cool. So a good example is an end rod. I've used the end rod on the shelves, the pale oak shelves in the design of this. And because the shaders treat them as if they're a light source, there's no block light coming from them, but they glow. They have an effect on them.
Yeah.
And if you put them on, they don't have a glow effect if you put them on a shulker box, but they are a vertical white line for me because they don't have the little purple bottom on them. And so if I had a bunch of shulker boxes in a row that had like this little white line on them, then that could look really cool. I could also put something like a hanging sign or something that looks a little bit more technology based, like an observer or a crafter, maybe a hopper. Like I'm just trying to think about things that I could put on that might look more like a pattern or might look more like a storage unit. Eye of Ender, maybe like something cool like that could be used. And then because it would be at a farm building where the only thing I'm storing is this one thing, I don't have to wonder what's in it. Like if there's shulker boxes there, they're going to have bamboo in them or something. So I can do that and try to incorporate in them. And they could either be white, they could be colored, they could, I don't know what we could do, but yeah, I'll try to figure something out. Red shulker box with a redstone block on it might look kind of fun,
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always a little bit of kind of suspension of disbelief that you can do in these situations.
A little bit, yeah.
I think shulker boxes, out of all of the storage options, feel like they're gonna look the most futuristic or feel the most versatile in this kind of thing, because they can be attached to any surface as well. So it's going to feel a little weird if you have your chests like lining the ceiling, but if you like reach up into an overhead locker like you're on an airplane and, you know, grab some stuff out of that, it's going to feel a bit more sci-fi to me.
Yeah, and with shulker boxes too, like you could reverse them and use the bottom texture. It's kind of like a weird spiral, but if that works for what you're doing, they'll still open as long as there's space behind them. You just have to place them on the right temporary block and then remove it, right?
Yeah. So there's some options there. There's definitely some options.
Yeah.
It's good that you've been having such an aesthetically driven week, because my week has been entirely too technical. I have been working on finally converting the 2 zombie spawners that I have into a drowned farm, mainly to assess whether or not having a drowned farm is even going to be viable next to my copper aging facility. The whole point of this is to get copper, and copper is a rare drop from drowned in the same way that iron is a rare drop from zombies, but it's one of the only ways you can farm copper renewably, so I figure I might as well give this a try. I mocked up a design in Creative first, which was a lot simpler in terms of the method by which the drowned get to the player and in a position to be killed easily. But I made a couple of mistakes with this. The first being that I wasn't very accurate in measuring the distance between the 2 spawners. I just kind of went, there's one like maybe 5 or 6 blocks above the other one, and it turns out that it's more like 11 or 12 blocks above the other one, so my AFK spot has to be a lot closer to the top spawner than I originally thought. So I can't just have them walk out of this tank of water once they've become drowned and come and find me like a couple of blocks away from the farm. I have to be like elevated in my position. The other thing that I forgot about was that drowned's behavior changes during the day. Like if you're on the shore in like a beach biome or something and drowned are coming out of the water at you at night, they won't leave the water during the day because there's a risk they'll burn in the sun. So you have to calculate a couple of these things into when you build a farm like this, because for half of the time that you're standing there swinging your sword at them, they're going to be behaving a little bit differently. And so I've redesigned it a little bit in the survival version to work better. And this was a thing I sort of came up with on the fly in survival rather than having pre-designed it in creative. But there's a tank into which all of the zombies fall from the spawners. They drown in there because zombies can't swim. They just sink to the bottom. It's only 2 blocks high water, but that's really all they need. As soon as they are converted into drowned, they can swim up to the top of the tank. And so one wall of the tank is extended upwards, and it is half of a set of like full water sources, and the other half is bubble columns. And it's surrounded by a mixture of trapdoors and fence gates, both to keep the water in and to allow the zombies through a certain part of it. Once they become drowned, they can go through the fence gates. They get caught up in this bubble column, trying to pathfind towards the player. And now that this wall of water is basically there for them to stay in, they are much happier pathfinding towards the player even during the day, because they can stay immersed in water. So the AI doesn't think, retreat to a source of water because you're going to burn if you step out of that. Even though this is all in a cave, you know, it's not open to the sky or anything. This is all in a dugout area below the Windy City. But I had to counter some of their AI in the process of this, and so I was kind of studying the Minecraft wiki page about how drowned work and trying to figure out the best way of doing this. I was also hoping that this was going to be a design that really could take advantage of the spear as a way to dispatch the mobs, because the spear can hit multiple targets, and there are a couple of different ways of, you know, killing mobs at this point that will still get you decent drops because the spear can have looting. And unfortunately, it feels like the spear is going to be less viable on account of the sword's sweeping attack really hitting more stuff. And once they reach the top of these bubble columns, there are water streams that carry the drowned in towards the center, but I'm still hitting maybe like 2 or 3 drowned with the spear and maybe 10 or 11 with a swing of a sword. And that both has the possibility of, you know, dealing damage to them, which overall means that they die faster and the drops arrive faster, but also, when I set the world to hard, has more chance to create reinforcements, which is one of the things I haven't done with this farm yet, but I would like to. Because in the creative version of the farm, even with a simpler design, I built a few tanks of water around the outside for reinforcements drowned to spawn in. And you can tell when they start generating because the drowned that convert from the zombie spawner don't have tridents, they don't have nautilus shells, or fishing rods or any of the stuff that drowned typically spawn with naturally, and the reinforcements do. So that's a sure sign that reinforcements are generating in the farm. It's also something I have to prepare for because my current design for this farm is a little bit more open because these drowned, aside from the occasional ones that have spears when they generate from the zombie spawner, they can't reach me with anything because they don't have ranged attacks. But if one of them spawns with a trident, I get spearfished very quickly. So I need to maybe account for some of that in redesigning this once I have the reinforcement tanks in place. And there's a couple of ways I'm thinking about doing this now, which is either big water tanks all on each side of the farm, and the drowned can kind of swim down to the level where all of the rest of the drowned are being, converted from zombies, and they can join that sort of updraft of drowned who come to attack the player. Or I create tanks with bubble columns around each side and have them come up from below. And what that could potentially do is deliver them to that part of the farm a lot quicker rather than relying on their natural, relatively slow swimming movement. And so I'm going to maybe tinker with some of that in creative just to see which is a bit more viable. But you've got to create a lot of potential spawning space for drowned to spawn because they need 0 light level, they need to be immersed in water. You can get them in 2-block high sections of water, but the range at which reinforcements can spawn is something between 7 and 40 blocks. So there's a lot of space in which they could spawn. And you also have to make sure local difficulty is high enough, but I've spent so much time in these chunks because I dug them all out by hand that I do think the local difficulty here is as maximum as it can possibly be. So yeah, we'll see how this progresses. But right now, I'm happy with it at least getting the drowned to me. I think that was going to be the most challenging logistical part of this, and so that at least is working as intended for right now.
I know I have a reinforcement zombie spawner on the Citadel, but it was meant for copper, not for tridents or for anything else.
Yeah.
So I don't think, it's underground, so it's not exposed to the day. But also, I don't think there's ever a moment in it where the zombies are not in water. I think that's how they're moved constantly, right up to the point where they're dropped down to the killing chamber. So I don't know that I've had to deal with the fact that they act differently during the day. It makes sense that they do. Yeah. And that's an interesting design challenge when making a farm like this. And something else that you mentioned that I didn't realize is the survival guide season 3 not on hard?
No, it's been on normal since the beginning.
Wow.
My commitment to this being as default as possible was even such that I left the difficulty on the default value. Okay. And so I haven't zombified and cured a ton of villagers. The ones I did that with were either zombie villagers to begin with, like the one I found in the igloo at the beginning of the series became my mending villager, and that curing discount has never really gone away. And also, I think I spawned a couple of zombies and had them convert villagers after that. But there's only maybe 1 or 2 of those that survived because they have a 50% chance of dying instead of being converted. So I haven't done that with any of the villagers whose trades I've already locked in. All of the rest of them I'm trading at normal prices and getting occasional supply and demand discounts, the way you get the sort of villager economy fluctuating. And so if I update to hard, we are probably going to talk about, well, now we can zombify all of these villagers, and now we're getting spiders with potion effects showing up, and now skeletons will be a little bit more accurate, and all of the mobs do a little bit more damage. So I was hoping for there to be a moment where I could upgrade from normal to hard and talk about the differences in difficulty in Minecraft, and I was not expecting needing zombie reinforcements to be part of that.
Right.
But with this farm, I've obviously had to work with the fact that if I'm hitting drowned over and over again, the only thing that can spawn as a reinforcement is more drowned. You can't get regular zombies out of that. And if I just hit regular zombies, then I'm going to be killing them and not getting copper from the drops of those. So it's been a little bit different to the typical zombie reinforcement designs you might have seen in the past, just because they've adjusted things to make sure that spawns are they are to the zombies that you kill in the first place. If you get husk reinforcements, you're getting husks that show up. And so, yeah, a bit more of a challenge than the copper farms used to be, and I'm curious to see if that actually makes the farm more or less viable, because it's given me maybe 48 ingots in about half an hour of using the farm, which is enough to make 5 blocks of copper, maybe 6, something like that. And so I don't know if it's really all that viable as a method for getting copper unless I want to spend a lot of time AFK at this thing. And at this stage, I'm not certain I do, compared to the amount of effort it would take to continue digging stuff out, rearrange some of the existing copper aging machine that I've built, that kind of thing. There's a lot more work and consideration that has to go into it before I make this farm permanent. But for now, I'm just curious about messing around with the mechanics more than anything.
I think the last time I saw a copper farm that was really efficient was in one of the seasons of Hermitcraft, maybe 2 seasons ago. So maybe before these changes were made, but it took time to ramp up. Like, it wasn't like immediately you started getting lots of drops. It took like a really long time. But once you got it up to speed, the drops were just bonkers in terms of how much copper you were getting. So hopefully you'll find a balance, because I often find with farms like that, you build it on the server or on the world that you are in for just you. And then you're like, well, I run it once and then like I never have to run it again. And there's not as much fun in that. I prefer farms that are rewarding, but they don't feel completely overpowered. And so hopefully you'll find a balance that isn't frustrating. Like, it's also the opposite is true. If you spend a lot of time designing and building this thing and you get 48, drops of copper per half an hour, like, that's not a lot for the time invested in the design and the execution and sitting there and waiting and all that kind of stuff. I try not to AFK too much myself either. I much prefer to have something run in the background while I'm there, or something be efficient. Like, I'm trading with villagers, and it's funny that you mentioned zombifying villagers and turning them back. That's something I'm on the fence of doing. I found a couple of zombies when I was digging out the power core chamber, and I've named one and trapped it so I can use it to get the villagers changed and then change them back. I don't really need to, because we have an iron farm that's very good and it's pumping out a lot of iron. So I kind of have an infinite source of iron. I don't think it would really necessarily increase the amount of iron or quartz that I would get from the villagers. I think it might just lessen the trips to the iron farm, but it's not that hard. So like, I don't know. It's a lot of bother to just get like one iron ingot for one emerald when I'm trading 3 or 4, but with infinite iron, like, does it really matter? So I don't know how much that would benefit me. I think on the flip side, I would probably get, if I did it with the quartz guys, I would get more quartz for, like, rather than one run giving a stack and 8, I could probably get close to 2 stacks of quartz blocks. So I would have to do it less maybe, but I haven't really tried it, because honestly, I find it so frustrating. And in order to get the zombie up there, I'm going to have to use the happy ghast, and I just don't want to. Like, it's such a pain to do it. And then once I've done it, like, do I keep the zombie? Where do I keep the zombie? Like, I haven't thought that far ahead. The good news is that all the villagers are accessible from the front, so I can just drop the zombie in there, wall him in, and he'll walk around and poke all the guys, and then I just have to heal them. So it should be okay. But I mean, it's also one of those things where, like, I don't do it that often, so I have to look up how to do it, and I have to be careful how I do it. And if anything goes wrong, as it usually does, then I have to replace the villager, and it's a giant pain. So like, it's just not something I've pulled the trigger on yet.
Yeah. I'm curious if I do that sooner rather than later. But mainly, I've got a single cell iron farm, and that is now not fast enough for the amount of trading I've been doing, because I've been mending my tools every time I finish a section of the dig, and I need to repair my pickaxes. So I've been trading for that, spending all of my iron on those villagers and buying redstone back from clerics, and then realizing, oh wait, my iron farm doesn't keep up with this anymore. So I have 2 options: either zombify the villagers or expand the iron farm. And at this point, I'm thinking probably both. So we'll see how that goes.
Right.
But yeah, again, more technical stuff on the horizon for me, I'm sure. And then sooner or later, I'll get back around to building, but not today.
Speaking of technical stuff, there are a few technical changes in Minecraft this week. We have a new snapshot. Minecraft Java Edition 26.1 Snapshot 4 was released last week. Earlier today, we pranced into the shipping room in order to bring you the 4th snapshot of 26.1, featuring an equestrian batch of game drop cuteness. With this week's release, baby mounts are getting an adorable makeover. Donkeys, mules, every single horse variant. All of these tiny cuties are galloping into Overworld, looking tinier and cuter than ever. That's a quote from the article. New features, of course, added new baby sounds for horses. Some changes revamped the visuals of more baby mobs. Baby chicken wing textures have been updated and fixed. Baby mobs have been updated in terms of the models. The models, textures, and bounding boxes of the following have been changed: horse, donkey, mule, zombie, horse, and skeleton horse. The bounding box of baby horses, baby zombie horses, and baby skeleton horses has been increased to better fit the new models, and baby zombie horses and baby skeleton horses can only be spawned in creative mode by using commands. Technical changes: the data pack version is now 97.1. The resource pack version is now 78.1. Under the data pack, the world clock has added Minecraft the_end, a world clock to the end dimension. It now controls the sky flashes in the end. Under tags, there's the following tags have been added, which determine which blocks a category of vegetation can be loaded on and survive. This is supports stem fruit, supports pumpkin stem fruit, and supports melon stem fruit. The resource pack changes: new entity textures for baby horses, baby horse variants, donkeys, and mules, and new entity sound effects for baby horses and variants. There are a few fixed bugs of note in Snapshot 4. Shipwrecks sometimes generate split into different variants at chunk borders. The aura of beacon beams now always renders behind block entities. The top texture of stripped spruce logs is now inconsistent with Bedrock. Villagers have insomnia. Piglins in groups fail to initiate hoglin hunting behavior. Hoglins and zoglins no longer attack. Sugarcane can no longer be placed on red sand. Iron golems now spawn in abundance, and melons and pumpkins now grow only on farmland. There's also a number of other bug fixes that were made with the Villager Trade Rebalance experimental feature enabled. Those details, along with the full list of bug fixes, are available on the Minecraft.net changelog, linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
And if you aren't checking out the snapshot itself, but you want to see more pictures of the newer baby animals, Mojang has posted an accompanying article called Test Baby Mounts with New Looks, which this week highlights the changes to the baby mounts. Once again, that's at Minecraft.net, and we'll have it linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
So I've been thinking a lot about the baby mounts, and as an endgame player, I really don't use mounts that much anyway, but thinking about the new changes that they've been making and the amount of time going into it, this focus on baby passive mobs, and I do find it a little bit strange because they are cute and there really hasn't been much change to how they move or interact with the player, with the exception of maybe the rabbit, which got the adult got a new remodel and new animation as well. But unless there's a feature coming in Minecraft that allows players to keep baby mobs from growing up, this is a temporary feature. It doesn't matter how often you make a baby mob or find a baby mob in Minecraft, it will eventually grow up into an adult, and the adults haven't changed. So there's a lot of effort being put into these new baby mobs that don't stay around very long. Now, we know with data packs, there's a way to keep them from aging. There's one on Hermitcraft right now. I think they use name tags for it. But there's no mention in the vanilla game as to whether that's going to be a feature yet. So hopefully there's news on that coming, because it does feel strange to me that there's putting all this time into something that's temporary for every player. It doesn't matter what level you're at. If you interact with baby mobs, they will eventually just not be there anymore. Have you thought like this is strange at all?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's odd that it's a part of the game that I imagine the majority of players interact with pretty frequently, but for us as long-term survival players, we're not really that interested in like the animal farming side of Minecraft anymore. So it seems made for a subset of players who really interact with what we would consider early game Minecraft, but also just the process of like raising animals and using that as like a simulator. I can imagine there are a lot of like younger kids who are really into riding horses, who love to breed horses in Minecraft, and that's one of the reasons to play Minecraft for them is a video game that allows them to breed horses ad infinitum. Not a concern for us at all, but there are other play styles out there. And I think part of the emphasis on baby mobs has really just been it's spring, and that's when people think about baby animals, and they wanted something that felt kind of spring-like in the same way that Spring to Life last year felt like, you know, it was celebrating the natural world, and that was the sort of thematic thing. And I'm like, what are we doing for spring 2027 at this point? Like, you know, how often can we be expected to keep this theme going before it's like they no longer have, you know, stuff to mine there in terms of thematic things? The article also made a big deal about it being the year of the horse and how that's like an exciting thing because the baby horses are updating. I'm like, last year was the year of the snake and they didn't add snakes to the game. So they're kind of coming up with a few of these like fairly trivial justifications for why all of this is happening. I have seen people, and again, I don't want to get everyone running wild with like speculation, but I have seen people point out that this drop is heavily focused on work that the art team can do, and that hopefully points to other drops this year having more impactful changes to gameplay and mechanics, because this isn't like, if they're not changing the underlying AI of a lot of these animals and that kind of thing, it means that maybe a broader team of gameplay specialists is working behind the scenes on some stuff that's really going to change, mechanics or add something new. This line of thinking does lead to inflated expectations, so I don't necessarily want to put my foot down and be like, no, it's clearly that the rest of the team is working on something big. I do think it's maybe just freeing up people who have different priorities within the team to work on stuff that still feels like it's going to have a visual impact on the game in case of the work the art team is doing. That said, I've seen a lot of feedback this week from people who don't like the baby horses' faces because they're quite wide. They're about 6 pixels wide, I think, just maybe to fit all of the texture that they wanted in there, and have like the nostrils of the horse being on like the end of the long sort of snout in the right place. But because if they shrink stuff down, they also have to shrink the amount of pixels they use in it now, because they're trying to be accurate to the size of something versus the amount of pixels contained in the texture. A lot of people are joking, why the wide face instead of why the long face? And I think that's a pretty good one. I think I'm still curious if there's something else going on behind the scenes that's just not ready for us to see yet, or if this is going to be the primary focus of this drop. One of our emails last week pointed out that Lady Agnes said in a video, one of the pillars of this drop is encouraging players to form closer relationships with animals. And I'm curious to find out if this drop has other pillars we haven't seen yet, or maybe just mechanics to support what we have seen so far. Like, is there going to be anything that helps with the baby animals staying that way, or the stuff that we've talked about in the past with animals being drawn to certain blocks as though they have points of interest, even like automatic feeding. If you want to have if you want to have baby pigs around the entire time because you think they're cute, it would be great to have some sort of automatic feeder in the game that would allow those baby pigs to be bred, considering that they will be continuing to grow up. And while that's one thing that maybe separates the player from feeling attachment to the baby animals, if some of that stuff is handled automatically, that also opens up new gameplay avenues for people that don't just involve going and manually doing the task over and over again. So I'm curious if there is a little bit more coming in this drop for people who have a broader variety of gameplay styles, or if it's really focusing on the baby animals and the experience of people who are still interested in raising creatures.
And I don't know whether this is just bad timing or whether they're focused on it because it's happening elsewhere. And I promise I'm not going to turn every conversation like this into a Minecraft versus Hytale, but I did split my time this week between Hytale and Minecraft. And one of the things that's really obvious in Hytale to me is how engaging and how well animated and well modeled the passive mobs are in Hytale. The aggressive ones too, but for the sake of this conversation, the passive ones, the sheep, the chickens, the cows, the other imaginary things that are also livestock, they all have animations that have more weight and more personality. Granted, there is a higher texture, so I'm not going to be comparing the texture because it's the 32 versus the 16 texture, but they eat, they sleep, they roam, they react to the player when they spot you. They kind of like perk up, in the same way that a deer would kind of look at you if you walked by. They have all these interactions. And yes, there's still some bugs. They wander in different directions and sometimes they don't do what they're supposed to do. The bears will fall asleep while you're fighting them, like that kind of stuff. But that's early access. But by and large, just the models and the animation are much more engaging than what's happening in Minecraft. And I don't want to disparage the amount of work that goes into creating a new model, texturing new mobs, keeping them in with whatever art direction they have to keep them in for the Minecraft art team. But it seems like an awful lot of effort to make animals that grow up into the boring old animals that we have in Minecraft compared to a newer game that out the gate is, in my opinion, as an animator, as an artist, they're doing it better. And I want to see more from Minecraft. Like I want Minecraft to also do it better. And I it's such a strange thing that there's all this emphasis on these baby animals where really I think the focus should be equally spent on the adult animals. Like why aren't we getting an update to how the cows look and the sheep look, or even how they act or move, or behavioral issues like that? I shouldn't say behavioral issues, behavioral patterns, like how they respond to the player, how they interact with the Minecraft world, that kind of thing. It would be interesting to see those kind of changes that would then engage players and perhaps bring some players like you and I that don't engage with livestock that much to come back in and try it and see what the new mechanics are like, especially for someone that does like a survival guide where like, oh, well, it might be time to go revisit cows and chickens and those kind of things, that they have more benefits to the player, or they're just different. Like the rules have changed, but they've not changed anything. And to me, it feels just like a lot of effort for a very small result that's paling in comparison to something that's already out there. And so I'm hoping that there'll be some examples from Hytale that maybe Minecraft will look at, because when you're dealing with such a limited model, like, yes, the baby animals are cute in Minecraft. The new ones are well done, but I have to say that for what they are, when you're dealing with something that doesn't have knees or ankles and just walks around on a treadmill walk cycle, like, it's not as appealing as it could be. And we've seen from data packs and resource packs that there can be some animation in Minecraft with the models that haven't changed. They just have to be treated a little bit differently. So I'm hoping that they're put a little bit more into it, because a lot of players have played this game for a long time, and unless you change the way that a cow or chicken or a pig is going to interact with the player, I don't know that you're going to draw a lot of players back into engaging with that part of the game if the only thing that you're changing is the baby animals.
I think the inverse is potentially the problem, because I think Mojang are at this point so... I mean, they're not entirely beholden to players' wishes, but they always take players' wishes into account. And anytime something about the legacy features of the game gets changed, there is a lot of pushback about it. You think to the amount of people who seemed upset about the fact that zombified piglins were being implemented with like a slightly different texture and model than zombie pigmen used to be. But like there was really no functional difference between them, and people like were making threads protesting it, more or less. Like I do think there's some of that you have to take on the nose and just go, well, we're changing the game for the better. But it's the same reason that when they retextured a bunch of mobs in 1.14, they didn't touch the creeper, for example. Like
right.
there are some things about the game that feel like they have to stay that way for the sake of whether it's nostalgia or brand identity or any of that stuff. Like I imagine there is an artist within Mojang who must think, we need to update the chicken. It doesn't look like a chicken. It's never looked like a chicken. But they can't, because the chicken's in the Minecraft movie now. Like there's so many things about the game's identity that I think prevent them from doing that stuff. Or at least it has to be very heavily justified and everybody has to be on board. And if there are any dissenting voices, then that's a reason for them to roll back on an idea like that. Like I've been thinking a lot about this. We had a chat in my stream about it recently, and so many of the ideas that people have suggested for Minecraft to do feel like a no-brainer. There are so many features that could be implemented for quality of life. We were talking about like the item stacking mechanics from Hytale and like the sorting things in all of the inventories. It's not really all that game breaking, but I wonder if the argument internally within Mojang is that all of the item sorting stuff is meant to be gameplay. How much of it disrupts the patterns that players have already got into, and how much of it reduces the amount of problem solving those players have to do that leads to creative solutions. And so I'm wondering if maybe the same thing is true of some of the stuff with animals. Like, at what point does it feel like we are changing people's childhoods for people who've grown up playing Minecraft, and suddenly the sheep doesn't look the same way as it used to? Like, are people gonna be sad about that? Like, arguably you'd say they shouldn't be, but it's about whether or not it feels like it sort of disrupts the way people remember this game, and whether it really feels like necessary to do, and they don't want to touch anything that doesn't feel necessary. And so it feels kind of difficult to really answer that question as far as Mojang's perspective on it goes, but I suspect they are they all have the idea that maybe this stuff could get updated, but what's it going to break? Who's it going to affect? All of that stuff has to be taken into account, because we're looking at a game that's been around for 16 years, and everybody has to break 16 years of habits when dealing with those animals.
Well, I think too, when you're talking about nostalgia and stuff like that, like it's important to consider, but at the same time, technology changes. And if you want the game to continue as technology changes, at some point, you're going to have to change, unless the retro movement is just so strong that no one ever leaves. And that's a big gamble. We were talking about He-Man in the pre-show, and a really good example of that is the original cartoon of He-Man has a lot of nostalgia vibes for a lot of older people, middle-aged people right now. But that cartoon has been remade a number of times, and you can set the writing aside and the changes aside. It always looks better, because if you go back and watch that 80s cartoon, it doesn't look very good. And it was aimed at really little kids. It really doesn't hold up very well. Mickey Mouse is another great example. Steamboat Willie versus the Mickey Mouse cartoons in the 80s. Mickey Mouse looked completely different. Was animated better, looked better, was better at storytelling. So, there's a number of things that can change over time, I think, for the better. And in some cases, and this is more of a question, I don't want to come down like hard on either side of this, but like, if you don't roll with the punches and change some things eventually, there's a really high risk of being left in the dust. When something newer, shinier, or something that does it better comes along that has a very similar vibe, there's a chance that you're going to lose some people. And I would say that when you have those pushbacks on things like changing villager textures or stuff like that, or the hoglins and the piglins, I do feel like it's a vocal minority. Like when you get like a Reddit thread or somebody comes out, when you think about how many people play this game, it's not that millions and millions of people are screaming out. It's more like probably a couple thousand. But like when you think about how many people actually play, that's a really small percentage. And I think that in other ways, people that are not happy with those changes, they'll just quietly not play, right? As opposed to get on the internet and start ranting about it. So I don't know. I think it's something to consider as, video game technology and stuff rolls forward. Like, yeah, to your point, the sheep and the cows and the chicken have looked the same for a long time, but like, what was the technology available back then versus what's available now, right? And they've got texture packs. If you don't like the new textures, you can use the original texture pack and roll everything back to the way that it looked before. So they could also have that for models, if they really want to give players the option. But to your point, I think that it's also sometimes good as a studio, as a company, to say like, no, we are making this change. We feel this is better. We are going to move forward with this. And sometimes I think that by doing that, you end up having a stronger relationship with your audience, because then the players they feel like they are heard, but they don't feel like they have control. Like, you don't want the Minecraft player base to dictate everything. There's a really great series on social media right now about animating your bad Minecraft ideas. It's hilarious. And some of the ideas are very dumb, but I've heard them before, and people think that they're good. And then the animation really illustrates why they're not good. Worth checking out if you haven't seen it. But I think that's just a really good jokey example of like, just not every change, that is voiced on the internet is necessarily a good idea. But to go back to the baby animals, something that I did want to mention that I do find odd, and this is more of a joke than anything else, but we're calling them, even in the articles, baby horses, baby cows, baby chickens. We're not calling them foals, calves, lambs, piglets, chicks, right? Is that just how they're coded?
The article where they were introducing like test the baby mounts and the kind of the puff piece version of it does call the horses foals.
Oh, does it? Okay.
I don't know if there are specialized terms for baby mules and baby donkeys. This just calls them baby mules and baby donkeys, but it even goes so far as to say skeleton foals, zombie foals, you know. And I think they mentioned piglets and chicks and things in the previous article, but I think everyone's just so used to calling them baby whatever that I feel like players don't typically adopt that terminology, and so it becomes more about community terminology versus what Mojang has chosen to call them in their sort of official communications.
Because in the changelog, they refer them all as baby mobs, baby horses. Yeah. I had to summarize, because they would say over and over again, baby horses, baby donkeys, baby mules. Like they would say that in the changelog, and I had to like summarize and simplify it, so it wasn't so much to read. But they're not calling them foals or piglets in the changelog. So I'm wondering, like, when you see the entity in the game, like, is it a foal or is it a baby horse?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I would
Like,
imagine for technical reasons, it's probably a baby horse.
what the underlining code, like to group them all together so that they all start with the word baby for the sake of knowing what
Right.
you're spawning is probably how
100%.
it's done. Yeah,
Yeah.
but like, rather
Yeah.
than having to know all of the specialist terminology. It's like the group nouns for stuff is like knowing that it's a murder of crows or whatever. Like, I don't know if they necessarily need to go that far, but yeah, either way, we're still excited to see what's coming next, and we'll continue to report on this stuff as more baby animals are presumably added at some point soon.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on the baby animals. If you want to write into the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please keep the emails short and to the point if you can. It does help us include them in the episode. And be sure to let us know if you're a patron in the subject line, because it does help us organize where we put emails, either in the show or in the post-show, that kind of stuff. We've got a number of emails this week. This is going to take the place of the main discussion. So we're going to go through 3 or 4 emails live here on the show. And Johnny has the first one.
Yes, this first one comes in from Cinco with the subject Spear plus Nautilus equals awesome. I finally interacted with my first Nautilus the other day, and I, of course, had an enchanted spear with me. I also had an enchanted trident on me. After 60 seconds, it was clear that the spear combined with the Nautilus dash was very powerful and a lot of fun. One hit every mob I encountered. The trident, on the other hand, while I think the addition of the spear is great, it's pretty cheap to make. While the trident is a rare item, especially on Java, wouldn't it make more sense for the trident to be more powerful than it is currently? I've had this thought before the spear was introduced. Shouldn't Mojang have improved the trident in Mounts of Mayhem? Will they ever? Should they? If so, how do you guys think it should be changed? Cinco sat on the bottom of the ocean with his Nautilus buddy, dreaming about being able to hold right-click to use Riptide constantly.
I enjoy that Cinco didn't die in the
We have a couple of those.
Thought,
they're not death messages this time around. They're just more thoughtful sign-offs.
Yeah, I thought, sat at the bottom of the ocean. All right, here it comes. And it's like, oh, wait, no, he's got a Nautilus buddy. He can breathe underwater.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm the wrong guy to ask about spears and tridents. I do have a trident on the Citadel. It's been in a box in my barn in Dartmouth Meadows for probably years at this point. I know that the pointy end goes in the other guy. That's about as far as I know. One thing I do think, though, is that I was going to use the trident at the time to raid another ocean monument if I ever decided to go do that. But having read this email, I feel like I've learned something new, and it sounds like a Nautilus and a spear might be the better way to go if you're going to try to clear out an ocean monument, because of the water breathing one, but also the dash attack with the spear sounds like it could be pretty good, especially because you're going to be hopefully also dodging the laser attacks of the other guardians as you're swimming around the ocean monument. The trident does have more enhancements with the enchantments. I had to say that really slowly. The spear has a few things, but they're mostly about movement, whereas like channeling, Riptide, and loyalty seem like more powerful enchantments to me than what's available on the spear. The trident is also a long range weapon. You can't throw a spear, where you can throw a trident, and you have to go get it unless, of course, you have loyalty. That said, I can see the trident getting a damage output increase to better match the spear, at least in close quarter combat. Like maybe the range doesn't increase, but if you wanted to just like use it like a weapon, a melee weapon, then maybe that could be increased to be close to the spear, or like figure out which spear, because there's only one kind of trident. You can't do like a netherite trident or an iron trident. It's just the one. So I'm wondering like what level of spear would be a good trident equivalent. Maybe diamond, I don't know. And then on a related upcoming email, which we'll get to in a little bit, revise the trident from just a drop to a craftable weapon. If they're not going to buff it, then they might want to make it easier to get. I don't know what you would want to have to collect. I still feel like the trident would need to be something rare to get in order to craft it. Like I don't think just crafting it at the crafting table at a certain level, the same level that you have spears, makes any sense. I feel like you'd need some sort of Heart of the Sea or like something that's rare to get to craft a trident, but I don't have enough experience in the trident world to know like what would be a good equivalent for how rare they are in Java Edition, because they're not nearly as rare in Bedrock Edition.
Aesthetically, they make sense to be part of the copper family of tools just because the Drowned already drop copper and they have that kind of patinaed copper look to them, but also they would be much more powerful than any other copper equipment is. So it sort of feels like it's in a class all of its own, which is difficult when it comes to this stuff. And I think that was one of the things about them adding the trident. It was really the first weapon that got added since like bows were a thing. And that was the point at which, crossbows were later added in Village and Pillage, and we've had a few other weapons added to the arsenal since then. But I think the best way to improve the trident for my money is just to make impaling work the way it does on Bedrock Edition. Because impaling right now on Java does increase damage to a category of aquatic mobs, which only has one hostile example, which is Guardians. All of the other aquatic mobs are either neutral or passive. It's fish, or it's, dolphins, nautili, the kind of thing that will attack back when you attack them. But like you'd expect drowned to be in that category, but they are undead and therefore already affected by smite. So they've decided not to also group them with aquatic mobs and have impaling do more to them, which is kind of silly considering they're probably the most frequent, like difficult hostile mob to encounter when you're not raiding an ocean monument, and those are in very fixed locations. So on Bedrock Edition, it works differently because impaling does increase damage to any mobs which are standing in water, including when it's raining. So if you've got like an open plains biome and there's a skeleton facing you down, you could throw a trident with impaling 5 at it and probably one-shot it because it was in the rain. And so I think there's like an argument to be made for parity between the two versions to make tridents a little bit more viable combat-wise, but still you end up with the problem of them being circumstantial, right? I think the problem that leads a lot of players to return to swords as their primary weapon is that all of the other weapons in Minecraft are so heavily specialized that they become one use case, more or less. Like spears, yes, they're pretty good at keeping stuff away. I think the spear is probably the most versatile of the other weapons, but it's still specialized in that you have to keep stuff at range. You can't attack stuff that's up close to you, and that puts a lot of people off using the spear and just has them go back to the sword, which does the same damage, if not more damage, and has all of the same enchantments minus lunge, which takes you closer to an enemy so people don't want to do it. The trident is like that. The main two reasons to use a trident are for the specialized enchantments, for Riptide and for channeling. And I think most people barely even use Riptide for its full potential because, as players, especially on servers, people sleep all the time and they prefer a sunny day to rain. So we prioritize sleeping when it rains, and that means that the Riptide flight, that is frankly one of the coolest ways to get around and one of the fastest ways to get around, just doesn't factor into most people's gameplay experience. Also because you can't rely on it. And it also doesn't work in every biome because it doesn't rain in warm biomes like savannas and deserts.
Right.
So you end up with, a bit of a circumstantial approach that you can take to that. It has a really strong advantage if you want to get from A to B really fast. There are fewer, faster ways of doing it, but it's also, for people on lower spec machines, it allows you to fly faster than chunk loading can keep up with you, which is potentially even dangerous if you fly into a mountain that you can't see yet because it hasn't loaded. A lot of kinetic energy damage there. So I do think there's circumstances in which Riptide seems like a really cool idea, but people just aren't going to end up using it all that much. Likewise, thunderstorms, where you use channeling, allow mobs to spawn, and that's part of the reason to use channeling is so that you can charge creepers and get mob heads and, do all of the stuff with that. But obviously, the only conditions under which you can use channeling are therefore dangerous and potentially unpredictable. And so people tend to shy away from using that at all frequently. Not to mention the fact that thunderstorms only come along every once in a while. I only hear them, from down there in the Beacon Mine because I don't sleep all that frequently down there, and I mostly end up sleeping when I hear them because I'm worried about the surface spawning a ton of skeleton horses. So right. Yeah, there's a few kind of pros and cons with tridents, and I do think it would be kind of fun to have like a almost like an outboard motor for a Nautilus and be able to use Riptide and kind of propel the Nautilus along really fast instead of having the dash for it. I think some of these newer additions, especially stuff like the Nautilus and some of the older features like the Trident, just don't have the synergy that you would hope for them. And so maybe that's something Mojang can look into in a future drop. It could be like something to do more with certain circumstances. If you're riding a Nautilus, the Trident does double damage or something like that, right? Maybe something to incentivize players to diversify a little bit. because there need to be incentives like that in the game to make sure players don't just decide, I'm going to go back to using the sword because it's the old faithful and it's what I know does the damage.
Yeah, I don't use the trident to move around. I've never had much opportunity, which is funny because it rains all the time on the Citadel. I think at least once or twice a stream I have to sleep through a thunderstorm, or definitely have to sleep through the rain. Ever since I think it was the Caves and Cliffs update, it just rains a lot. On the server.
Sleeping doesn't reset the weather cycle anymore the way it used to. So if you slept all the time, it never used to rain. Whereas now it doesn't have any effect on that anymore.
Yeah. So, and I mean, it would be cool to have like that ability on the Mushroom Island because it's so flat. Like you could really get some distance and cover some ground with Riptide, and I really enjoyed like the kind of the different gameplay that you can get with like Cubfan doing the Riptide Golf, which I thought was
Trident
really,
Golf
really
is a fun one. Yeah.
Trident Golf, yeah, that was fun. I like the idea of using it with a Nautilus as well. Like, I mean, the cartoonist in me just like has this idea of like sticking the trident behind you and like spinning it or something like that, and then off you go across the surface of the water like a motorboat. Like that would be very, very fun and funny, but obviously very technically difficult to accomplish. But yeah, I do like the idea of crafting a trident. I feel like there's definitely a access problem for a lot of people when it comes to the tridents. And then once you have one, you want to make sure that you don't lose it. It feels very precious. But I like the idea of crafting them. I think that could be fun. I still wish that spears and even tridents could be used in things like dispensers. Like I think that could be an interesting gameplay mechanic if they were available to do that too. So, but that's a little bit sideways compared to what's happening in the email this week. But yeah, like I feel like there's a little bit of a, as you said, like the opportunity costs of using a trident versus the everyday of a spear is a really good point to make. Pardon the pun.
I do think in one of the combat snapshots, they allowed tridents to be shot by dispensers. I just checked this on the Minecraft wiki, and apparently in Bedrock Edition and in one of the combat tests for Java Edition, tridents could be shot by dispensers. I think the problem then is you can't collect them. You could collect them maybe as the player, but like you can't collect them in an automated fashion. So that's why snowballs or arrows are easier to farm and feed into a dispenser than tridents would be. But yeah, no, I agree. I think there's definitely some potential there. It'd be fun to see them revisited in a future drop maybe.
Next email comes in from Tim S., a landscape artist member in our community. Rope ladders in Minecraft is the subject. Hi, Joel and Johnny. In episode 385, when discussing maneuverability in Hytale, Pix mentioned using a water bucket as a grappling hook in Minecraft, but it has its downside of getting stuff wet below you. Given that the player can already put swimmable blocks within reach and then pick them up from a distance with a bucket, I wonder if there's a way to make a rope ladder in Minecraft. The main difference between a regular ladder and rope ladder could be that when it's broken, perhaps with another rope ladder in your hand, the rope ladder goes straight into your inventory rather than falling down as an item. Perhaps it could also be placed in midair if below another rope ladder, similar to how a water bucket can help with overhangs. Tim finally explored that ravine because he knew he could get out safely without getting wet.
I do think ropes end up in modded Minecraft a lot, right? Like that's probably your experience too, having played a little bit. You find like ropes and other unattached ladders. Like you can find a version of a ladder that will just hang down into a ravine or like from an airship or a floating island or whatever. I think they fit the setting reasonably well. And I sort of like the idea of them inverting scaffolding mechanics, right? Like the notion of being able to place something from the top down instead of from the bottom up and have it just go in a vertical line, which makes sense with rope. Like ropes that could only be placed downwards does seem to make sense, instead of doing the kind of like the rope going straight up in the air from the ground. Just feels a little bit odd. Even when you see that in the nether with twisting vines that you find in warped forest biomes, it still feels very unnatural to have it look like that. And so I feel like that's the closest we have to being able to climb a rope, is climbing twisting vines if you've got them with you.
Yeah, Hytale has ropes and chains that you can climb up and down, and but they also place like blocks, so you can't just like place like scaffolding. You start at the bottom, you just keep on placing it, and it keeps on growing. in Hytale, you'd have to get underneath the rope to place it. You'd have to kind of like do some maneuvering to place it once and then use it like a ladder.
Right.
There's also ladders in the game. I don't know whether ladders in the game can be placed on their own. I feel like I've seen them, but I don't know. But I like the idea, as you mentioned. I had that in my notes as well, of using a rope ladder like reverse scaffolding, like going to the edge of a block, hitting the rope ladder, and then repeating that. Dropping like 60 rope ladders to get down that drop in the nether. Like to bring it with you as like a way of getting down safely without having to bring scaffolding. And then like if you leave it, it sort of looks a little bit nicer in the world. Like scaffolding kind of looks funny. Whereas if you have a rope ladder hanging from, a couple of cliffs that you've been adventuring along, like it feels a little bit more like part of the world, part of the technology. And I don't know about breaking it and having all go back into your inventory. I'd imagine that if it was to happen, it would be very much one block at a time. And if you broke the top one, then it would all crumble down to the bottom and you'd lose the rope ladder, or you'd have to find another way to go down and get it. I'd imagine that would still be the same. If they could do it all in a straight line, though, I would appreciate it, because the number of times that I've been working on these giant rooms in the command center and having to break scaffolding, and it just goes everywhere and lands on the ledges of all the cool depth and detail that I've put in there. So I'm just constantly losing scaffolding, because it's just like I start off with a stack and I've got 48 by the end of the stream, because like some of them are just hovering somewhere I can't see because it explodes when you take it down.
Yeah.
And it's just not convenient at all. Yeah, so that's something that could be implemented. I was also thinking that with the rope ladders fitting the technology, that means that they would be available pretty early on. Like you can make ladders as soon as you get sticks and wood. So I'm not sure what you'd need for rope. I'm assuming probably string in Minecraft.
Yeah.
So you have to kill some spiders. But then maybe if rope ladders had a limit to them, like maybe they can only go down 6 blocks, maybe you can only do so much with them. But then chain ladders didn't have a vertical limit, like maybe something like that, which would unlock, after you discovered iron, did some smelting. If you wanted to make a lot of them, you'd probably want an iron farm. So like there's something like that could be like almost like a tiered effect to traversal, where like, yeah, you get a rope ladder, it's going to help you with like 10 blocks in the early game. But if you want more, you're going to want to go with an iron ladder or a chain ladder or something. And that could be something just as simple as like changing the ropes to chains in the model and having it look just a little bit different. Still have wood planks as far as the construction goes, and how the ladder looks. But I like the idea of a freestanding ladder, because not only would it help with traversal around the world, I think it would also help with building and creative builds like tree houses, or even just like a little shack that you don't want to put a stairwell in, but you want a ladder in the middle as opposed to up against a wall, right? Mm-hmm. You want something that's just a little bit different. And I like the idea of having that, because they work all the time. Like that's how a lot of attics around here are accessed, is like a ladder that you pull down from the ceiling, that kind of thing.
Yeah. How do you prefer to climb ladders in Minecraft? Do you push forward or do you jump?
That's a really good question.
I was trying to think about it myself, and I was like, I don't know, because it's all just muscle memory at this point. But I think I do a combination of both. I think maybe depending on the circumstance, I tend to like hold W to get on the ladder, and then maybe I hold jump when I'm on it.
I think I would switch. I think I probably switch to the spacebar if I need to hold my position.
Yeah.
Like if I need, like, because if you stop on a ladder, don't control anything, you slide down it, right? Like you have to press a key.
You've got to crouch, I think, to stop on a ladder.
Crouch.
So you can do that without holding. It's not like when you're on scaffolding and you've got to hold crouch and jump to make sure you don't like phase back down through it.
It's so funny when you play this game so much, how much muscle memory there is and how little you recall of actually what your fingers are doing. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so if I want to maneuver on a ladder, I'm holding down Shift, and if I want to go up, I press the W key. Like I don't use the space bar.
Right, because that's
I think I use that when I'm swimming. That's when I'm in the space bar.
Yeah. Because that's my follow-up question is like, at that point, if you have climbable ropes, do they have collision? Are they like ladders where you walk into them and then you just go upwards? Or do you have to use jump to climb them? Because again, that's a little bit of rewiring muscle memory you have to do, which might be easier if you're interacting with a brand new thing. But if they don't have collision, then it's like walking into like the hanging vines that you get from the Nether, for example. Is like you kind of have to jump up through them.
Yes.
And I think the advantage ropes would have over vines like that to begin with is that you could place them on the side of a block, but then you have questions of like how big the hitbox is and where you start like falling off it because you're too far over to the left or right, or you're kind of adjusting your position, or you get hit by an arrow, and you could. I think it's feasible that a player could be climbing a rope and be hit by an arrow, but still be able to like hold on even as they take damage. But typically, arrows hitting you applies momentum; it shoots you off of ladders or vines or whatever it is. And so there's a few things that would be slightly off about the rope climbing experience unless it was very specifically implemented. So I think there's some maybe some nuance to that idea, really.
Yeah, and are you on it like a track, or can you jump off of it? Like currently, we can just, because ladders are not. They don't have collision. You can kind of like use the block as collision, but if you jump off, if you have a long way down, you know how people like ladder hop, like they'll kind of fall and then catch themselves and fall and catch themselves.
Yeah.
Could you do that on a freestanding ladder, or would you want to? Like, would it be harder to get back on if it has collision? Like, I don't know what kind of gameplay that would unlock.
Yeah. Do you have to be facing the rope? Can you climb a rope facing backwards? Just with your hands behind your back or whatever.
Yeah.
And this also comes back briefly to the thing I was talking about before with like stuff that seems like a no-brainer. Like ropes feel like they fit the world of Minecraft reasonably well, so I wonder if they haven't been implemented because the designers feel like that niche is filled by some of the other stuff that we have to climb. Do they expect players to find unconventional solutions to solving problems, like the fact that a lot of people use water buckets for vertical travel and climbing like sheer rock faces? And is this part of the creativity that they expect from people when they say that restrictions breed creativity? Is this the same philosophy that means we can't hang lanterns from the side of blocks? Also says, ropes don't exist, so find another way. Get creative with it. And that encourages players to think outside the box. Maybe, but I do think, there are some things like this that you're like, why don't we have ropes in Minecraft? And, it sort of takes you on a slippery slope from that point, really.
Yeah.
Well, from there, we're going to move on to Chris T's email for us. Chris is another landscape artist member of our Discord, and the subject is renewable items. Pix and Joel. In a recent Hermitcraft video, some of the older members shared their thoughts around nerfing the rarity of name tags, stating that making them craftable reduces the desire to go explore dungeons for loot. Keep in mind there is already a method to get name tags in a renewable fashion with a small time investment in a villager trading hall. I could see that many newer players might not even know that part of the game loop even exists, making name tags inaccessible to a large population. What are your thoughts on making previously rare items more easily renewable or craftable? Do you have any specific items that you would want to see get similar treatment?
Well, we already have craftable name tags with a data pack on the Citadel, to the point where I forget that they weren't something that you can craft. And I think one of the things that's smart about making desirable items like name tags craftable is the respect for the player's time. So especially with name tags as a vanity item, like they don't really, to my knowledge, affect gameplay all that much. I mean, yes, you can name things so they don't despawn, but that's about the only thing that comes to mind. Most of it's just like naming stuff for the sake of fun. And it's not really necessary. So the fact that if people want to have fun with them, they have to grind and go find them feels strange to me. So I like the idea of making them more available. Talking about the tridents earlier, Heart of the Sea is something that I think would be nice as a craftable thing, because I think then you could make conduits more accessible. And you and I have talked on the show before about conduits, not just for their effect, but for like their lighting. They look kind of sci-fi. Like they're a unique block and a light source that is not kind of like a torch or a candle or a lantern, and could be used in a bunch of other different creative ways, problem solving, as you just mentioned. And so I don't think the conduit itself is already craftable, but I think the Heart of the Sea is maybe the bottleneck there for making that a little bit more accessible. And I think that would be a good way to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would love craftable conduits or craftable Hearts of the Sea. I was thinking about this. I went to the Minecraft Wiki article about rarity, because obviously it tiers items based on the uncommon, rare, epic thing that we don't really put a ton of emphasis on in Minecraft, but it does exist when the name color changes. And you think about things like the dragon egg, it's got like a purple name to show that it's like a legendary item or whatever. And I was looking through that list, and I didn't see a ton of stuff on there, but then I stumbled on like the smithing templates and stuff like that. And I think it's great to have exploration to go and find those. But the one that I sort of disagree with its placement in the game right now is still the Netherite upgrade template, which is in Piglin Bastions exclusively, and you didn't used to require a Netherite upgrade template before they implemented armor trims in 1.20, and then smithing templates being introduced. Netherite upgrades were a part of that now. And I think it's one of the problems with there being such a broad range of gameplay is that Bastions, they feel like an exploration and a combat experience, or perhaps a stealth experience. You're going to be in one or the other situation to get hold of a Netherite smithing template. And you're putting players who might not necessarily want to be part of that into that situation. So like builders, for example, I would love to have Netherite upgrades on my axe, my pickaxe, and my shovel. Like, I can take or leave the weapons if I'm more focused on, the non-PvE aspects of the game. And, the same goes for armor, right? 60% of the Netherite upgrades you probably want to make for the broader look at the game is going to be weapons and armor. But if you're a builder, or maybe even a redstoner who just wants to have, like, more durable tools for a longer period of time, there is no other way to acquire a Netherite upgrade template than to go and have this arguably fairly difficult combat or stealth challenge. And if you're happy working with diamond tools because they last for a longer time, then obviously that's fine. But I do think it's odd that the only way to acquire the best tools in the game, not even weapons and armor, but the best tools, is to go into a situation that's potentially very hazardous. And so I wonder if there's another way that we can get hold of Netherite upgrades in future, whether that's through something more like archaeology, through excavation. It's still an adventure experience, but one with a very different emphasis on the gameplay play there. You're not raiding an archaeological site like a desert temple, or digging up a trail ruin and suddenly there are mobs popping out of everywhere, right? So I think there's potential for stuff like that, and hinting at it being part of the past as well could be really part of it. But yeah, I think Netherite upgrades are probably one of the only things now that I think, as far as rarity goes, I would be more interested in being available different ways. But that's not even necessarily with renewability, because you can reproduce the template once you have it, and if you're on a server and somebody else can go and get it for you, then they can duplicate it for you and you can duplicate it from there. So I suppose it's not necessarily the renewability or craftability there, it's the access to them in the first place that I'm more concerned with.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like when I was asked the question in the email, I feel like, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that I would like to have as a craftable item, but then like I didn't come up with much. I don't know whether it's just because I maybe have them as a data pack already, and I'm not thinking about them, or at this stage in the game, 8 years into a server, I just have access to so many things that I've built farms for that I don't need to go in and have those things be craftable. So I think it's a touchy thing, because like you don't want to remove gameplay either. Like something that's farmable, even as a really hard, complicated farm to make, you don't want to remove that from the people that have taken the time to technically design that and feel very proud of that accomplishment, right? Like when you start to remove the payoff, then the gameplay starts to be less fun. So it's difficult that way. But yeah, it's with cosmetic stuff, like I like the idea of name tags. I'm struggling right now to think about other things, but I'm with you on templates, because when I was on the wiki, I saw all the templates. I was like, okay, well that makes sense that they're rare, but like once you get one, you can craft as many as you want with this different armor patterns and stuff like that. So I was like, well, that doesn't really fit the description, because like I don't want to just be able to craft those whenever, but at the same time, one of the reasons I've not engaged in any of the armor trim stuff is like it's not really all that important to me, but also like I don't want to go looking for it. So like if I had the ability to craft the armor trims, would I have been using them more often in the game? Probably, right? Like would I have thought, I'm going to make my armor look kind of sci-fi, for this next few months and change it, maybe, but because I have to go find them, like it's not something I'm interested in doing. So yeah, it's a hard nut to crack, because I feel like a lot of those things that were rare on the wiki were like, well, I don't want to remove that gameplay by making it craftable, right?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting if there were more items where you only learn how to craft them once you've acquired it through the initial means yourself. Like, go back to the trident example, right?
Yeah.
The first time you get a trident off of a drowned, if a crafting recipe pops up and be like, you can make this now because you've held one in your hands and you know what the pieces are.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if something like that could be possible, right? Where maybe you have access to the materials required, but not the recipe, since those two are separate. And yeah, some people might take issue with the fact that certain recipes are locked behind that. Like, once you understand that there is a crafting recipe for a trident, why can you not just make one? And where does player knowledge and player character knowledge have that divide, right? And so there's maybe a bit of suspension of disbelief that needs to happen there. But I do think, yeah, there's maybe an opportunity to use that mechanic for something that is rare initially, but then once the player learns how to craft it, it can be more abundant. But yeah, with rarity in general, like the problem I have with renewability in this game is not necessarily that there are rare items. It's that there are blocks that are considered abundant but are not renewable, like sand. But I've discussed that plenty of times here. We don't need to go into that right now, but that's sort of the main argument that I would have in that respect. We are going to save our final email for the render distance, so that it's another patron email, and so hopefully our patrons can have fun listening into a final discussion. But for now, that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of the Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and the Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday. You can join our monthly hangouts where you get to let us know what you've been up to in Minecraft. And we also have a quarterly hangout where we go into all the behind the scenes, facts and figures, the download numbers, the YouTube metrics, all of that stuff. So if that's your jam, once again, patreon.com/thespawnchunks is the place to go. We currently have 268 patrons, which is up 2 more from last week. Thank you so much for jumping on board. And special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Kiner Beeld, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. It's free. Just let them know that they can find the Spawn Chunks at the Spawn Chunks on your favorite social media. It's also available on podcasting platforms around the globe, wherever you listen to podcasts, and video versions on Spotify and on YouTube. New episodes are out on Mondays almost all the time. Sometimes we're a little bit late, but most of the time it's a Monday, unless it's like a holiday or power outage or something, knock on wood. If you would like to email the show, it's spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. You can also find the RSS feed on the spawnchunks.com and the patron-only RSS feed on the Patreon page. And that's where you can listen to the Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast. And that RSS feed is also available on Spotify. If you're a Patreon member, you can hook up your Spotify and your Patreon and listen to your bonus content right on Spotify as well.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I normally do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube stuff, but hang around this week to see me introduce a bunch of folks from the Hermitcraft server to the wonderful world of Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to be streaming that Friday and Sunday this week. It's going to be an event. Don't miss it. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point you towards the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. We were supposed to record last week, but we had to push it, so that's coming up this week. We're going to be talking about things we're looking forward to in 2026. There are a lot of new trailers out for some new films, so we'll be reviewing those. And I am also on Twitch. I stream Tuesday through Friday at 9 a.m. and Saturdays at 1. Right now I'm splitting my time between Minecraft and Hytale, usually both in the same day. I usually start the stream with Minecraft and then I switch over to Hytale about halfway through. So you can check out both over at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and I've been through the desert on a horse with no name tag.